Welcome to AUDL Weekly. This is the show all about ultimate stories, perspectives, conversations, and more. And I'm Evan Lepler, still basking in the energy of Championship Weekend 11 in Madison. Did we have the three greatest games ever like we were expecting? No. The three games were all basically decided midway through the fourth quarters with final margins of 5, 6, and 8 across the competition. However, I still thought Championship Weekend was super exciting in so many ways. More than anything, though, it was a coronation for the New York Empire as they win their second title in the past 3 seasons, also their second undefeated season. Coming up here on the season finale of AUDL Weekly, we'll dive into the weekend that was with Adam Ruffner and Daniel Cohen and get their closing thoughts on the 2022 season. But first, I'll share my take on everything that happened at Championship Weekend. Beautiful day for a toss, and that's coming up as you watch AUDL Weekly on AUDL.tv. So stick around. All right, welcome back. The New York Empire have quite simply redefined excellence in the AUDL, smashing opponents and records in the process. And it's kind of funny how their one-goal buzzer-beating win against DC threw us off their scent a little bit in terms of the juggernaut status. And look, it was totally reasonable to question what happened in the second half for the Empire against the Breeze. They coughed up a 5-goal lead, needed Ben Yacht's birthday buzzer beater to survive and advance. But historically, that'll be remembered more as a brief blip because of what they did to a pair of really worthy opponents at Championship Weekend. On Friday against the Carolina Flyers, the Empire absolutely out-executed and outclassed the reigning champions. Biggest play of the game, in my opinion, was the weird sequence at the end of the first quarter when the stadium clock malfunctioned, halting the Flyers' end-of-quarter charge with about 17 seconds left. They fixed the problem. Then the play restarted. It was Carolina basically getting a free timeout, but it also enabled the Empire to reset the defense, and it allowed John Randolph to make an incredible play by hand-blocking Alex Davis's high-release backhand, which sent New York off to the races. Ben Yacht coming down with a floating huck just shy of the goal line. And then, just before the buzzer, he released a scoring throw to Marquez Brownlee. It looked like the Flyers were going to get within one and have a chance to receive to begin the second, possibly tie the game, and instead, New York was up 5-2 with all the momentum, and the Flyers were in a tough spot. Carolina got one break back in the second quarter, but it turned out that was the only break they'd have all night, as New York played patient and poised ultimate to win 22-16. One night later, it was eerily pretty similar story. Empire buzzer beater at the end of the first quarter to lead by 3. Another tremendous throw from Jack Williams with the clock winding down. Certainly one of the big stories of the weekend was New York scoring the last goal of the quarter more often than not, and those little mini breaks accumulated to make life that much tougher for both Chicago and Carolina, respectively. And obviously the great example of that is when the Union were making their late push. Late in the third, they were down 15-9. They got a hold and back-to-back breaks. All of a sudden, it was a 15-12 game with about 45 seconds left in the period. The Union on the charge. Chicago knowing it'll receive to start the fourth. Maybe a chance to get back within 2. Who knows? We've seen crazier stuff happen, especially at Championship Weekend. But then Jeff Babbitt just does what he does at the Final Four. Another massive buzzer-beating sky from Babbitt. Officially 1 second on the clock, but another great throw from Williams, and from there, the New York Empire were in great shape. Chicago scored the first goal of the fourth to get back within 3, but then a 6-1 run from there, convincingly closing it out. It's the second perfect season and the Empire's second championship. 22-14 was the final. No question the game closer than the final score would indicate, especially in how difficult so many possessions for New York actually were. But look, they exuded patience, so many challenging but successful resets, executed well over the course of the weekend, Empire had just 8 turnovers in the final, which matches exactly the number of turns that the 2019 Empire had in their title game victory over Dallas. I know that 2019 team felt like they peaked at the right time, played their best game against Dallas when they needed to be great, and it was a similar story for the 2022 Empire at championship weekend. New York got off to great starts in both games. They closed quarters mercilessly. Their depth shined in a major way. I mean, John Lithio is more than depth at this point. He's becoming a superstar, but I thought Solomon Rushmeyer-Bailey was an absolutely stabilizing presence for the offense alongside Elliot Chartok. I thought Sam Feder played really great defense over the course of the weekend. Ethan Fortin was all over the place making plays. Marquez Brownlee had his share of highlights. Mike and Ryan Drost, the 33-year-old twins who've been in so many big moments throughout their careers, always finding a way to positively impact the game. And obviously the stars like Ryan Osgar, Jeff Babbitt, Ben Yott, and of course the championship weekend 11 MVP Jack Williams. They were all huge for the Empire as they take the title again. In the last 3 seasons now, that's 2 undefeated championships and 1 loss in the finals. New York now 42-3 in their last 45 games since the start of 2019. And going back further, it's hard to believe now. Through 9 games back in 2018, the Empire were just 4-5. And then they got hot to finish the year, kind of beginning this whole surge. Since starting 2018, 4-5, New York has gone 48-5 ever since. So congrats to the Empire. They are the AUDL champions for 2022. One other tidbit of news to drop in that was kind of buried a bit by championship weekend, but on Friday, the league announced that the second ever AUDL All-Star Game will be held this November in Portland. It's going to be on Saturday, November 12th, and there are still many details that need to emerge, but one thing I expect is that the game will air live on AUDL.tv, so that's a little exciting date to have on the calendar, just a little more than 2 months away. And of course, the first AUDL All-Star Game back in 2019 was an incredible experience. Team Rowan and Team KPS battling into double overtime at Bree Stevens Field in Madison. So curious to hear more details about the upcoming AUDL offseason All-Star Game. All right, when we come back, Adam and Daniel will chime in with their thoughts on the great moments from championship weekend and where will the 2022 Empire fit on the all-time hierarchy of AUDL greatness. Toss-up coming up next here on AUDL Weekly. One more time this season, we welcome in Adam Ruffner and Daniel Cohen for today's edition of Toss Up. Gentlemen, good to see you in Madison this weekend. Hope you're decompressing all right after championship weekend. And before we talk about the Empire, we'll talk about them a bunch. Adam, let's start here. Three-way toss-up. Who do you consider the second best AUDL team in 2022? Is it the Chicago Union, the Carolina Flyers, or the DC Breeze?
Now, while I appreciate you trying to be a little cute in asking this question, I think you need to put some respect on the runner-up Chicago Union's name, because I think they are absolutely deserving of their second place finish in 2022. They dispatched a very good Colorado team. They throttled Minnesota at home in the divisional playoff game. And look, we all had a lot of questions about how the Union were going to bounce back after a number of veteran departures following their 2021 semifinals finish. And I think that for the way that they responded to all that, coming back even stronger in 2022, really deserves some respect. I really think that they showed that they could hang with New York. I mean, this was a close game until the end of the third quarter when New York kind of seized the momentum and the crowd a little bit, but I thought the Union came out with a terrific game plan against the eventual champion Empire. I was just so impressed with their depth this season, and yeah, I thought they were the second best team in 2022.
I can't imagine Daniel's going to pick against Chicago, but who knows? Daniel, what do you got?
Well, I'm glad Adam said it. Now, no one can accuse me of my Chicago bias here. I'm going to agree. It's results-based, right? And I think it's partially because there's not a huge difference between these three teams. We never saw any of them play against each other. So you could use the benchmark how they played against New York. Obviously, DC played New York the best of any team in the league this year, but in the end, they didn't make championship weekend. You know, Chicago and Carolina both made it further than them, so it doesn't make sense to say DC was the second best team, better than Chicago or Carolina. And then Carolina played really well, but in the end, again, lost in the semis. Chicago did win their semis matchup. So I'm going to go towards the results here and say that Chicago was the second best team. It's really splitting hairs if you pick any of these three teams, but Chicago did finish in second place ultimately. So
I do think you could argue that it's not results-based, your argument. It's bracket-based, your argument. Chicago didn't have to play New York until the final, unlike DC and Carolina, and the Breeze and Flyers both played the Empire closer than the Union. So that is the case for the other two. But I agree with you, Adam. I will put some damn respect on the Union's name. They were phenomenal down the stretch of the season, and certainly,
that hard.
I think, exceeded all of our expectations with what they did this year. All right, let's move on. Topic number 2. What was the bigger play, Daniel, for New York at championship weekend? Was it John Randolph's hand block on Friday or Jeff Babbitt's buzzer beater on Saturday?
As a standalone play, based on the context of the situation, I'm going to take the Babbitt buzzer beater. The Randolph hand block was great, but it was arguably like the subsequent sequence that really was the impact, with Yacht having that huge sky and then throwing the assist to extend their lead in the first quarter. I think the Babbitt buzzer beater came at like exactly the time that Chicago was starting to rally. And I don't know about everyone else, but you sort of had in the back of your mind flashes of a potential 2016 repeat of that semifinal game with Seattle and Madison. Comebacks are possible at championship weekend, and the crowd was on Chicago's side. So the fact that Babbitt came down with that buzzer beater and just shifted momentum entirely going into the fourth quarter, and then New York was able to, of course, slowly build their lead and close out the win. I just think that came at absolutely the right time and really should deserve credit for New York pulling ahead.
Fair enough. Adam, what do you think?
I don't know, man. I mean, Jeff Babbitt at the buzzer is definitely a sight to behold, but I think that New York had pretty much held its lead at that point in the game. Chicago was making a certain kind of run of it, but I would have expected New York to close that out. Whereas if you compare it to that John Randolph hand block, I mean, Carolina, that was the first quarter. It was the beginning of the game. Both teams were still feeling each other out. Carolina had been playing some impressive defense up until that point. They were on the verge of scoring, and I think narrowing the gap to 1 had they scored that possession. And instead, John Randolph turns into Nightcrawler on the mark and basically teleports from one spot to another to get that hand block. And while, sure, it didn't close out the score technically, he set up the entire opportunity for that buzzer beater that completely swung momentum in that game. You could just see Carolina deflate after that point. It was completely remarkable to watch live. I barely caught it watching it myself on the mark. I mean, if you watch Randolph, he sets up by pushing in towards AD and then at the final moment jumping back in order to get into position. I haven't seen that, quite frankly, in a moment like that. It was something that I think, you know, as one of the New York coaches, I said in the presser, you grow accustomed to seeing those kinds of plays from JR, and then you take kind of a half step back and realize no one else has been doing that. I just think it was a unique play from a unique individual in a big moment, and I don't know, something about the defense right now is really impressive with New York. So I'm going to take the Randolph hand block.
Jeff Babbitt's buzzer beater, phenomenal. But look, he's doing it every year. They're becoming routine at this point. John Randolph's hand block was just sensational at a huge time in the game, changed the game, an incredible play for New York. I side with Adam. Sorry, Daniel, on this one. Let's move on. Topic number 3. Maybe the biggest existential question after championship weekend. Adam, toss up. Who you got on a neutral field with both teams at full strength? The 2016 Dallas Roughnecks or the 2022 New York Empire?
I think that the Dallas team was definitely impressive for its era and for its year, and had some all-time great talent, starting with Bo Kittredge and Kirk Gibson and Cassidy Rasmussen and on and on and on, Jimmy Mickle, Dylan Freechild. I could go on for days. But I think that the 2022 Empire would actually take it to that Roughnecks team. I just think that since 2018, you've seen an evolution in teams reducing turnovers, going towards possession ball, really trying some new defensive strategies to limit opposing offenses. And I just don't know if that 2016 Dallas team would be disciplined enough to deal with the top-down approach that we just saw from this New York team. I mean, I think also, for as talented as New York has been, one of the things that we discredited about them all season long was their effort. This is one of the hardest working champions we've ever had, and you heard it throughout the entire New York franchise organization this entire weekend, and they showed it out in the field. So I think that while 2016 Dallas undoubtedly has some all-time great talent, I don't know if they can really put up with the four-quarter discipline of this year's Empire team.
Interesting. Daniel, are you old enough to remember the 2016 Roughnecks?
Well, I was going to say, that was before my time, technically. I kind of think it wouldn't even be close. Like, New York could win by at least 5 goals against that Roughnecks team. Really, I'm a numbers guy, Evan. You know that about me. And looking at the efficiency numbers, it's really night and day. Like, today's AUDL teams, like Adam said, they are really performing at an extra level of efficiency that you just don't see at all. Even the best team, you know, the second undefeated team ever in Dallas in 2016, they were only converting 58% of their offensive possessions. New York set the record this year at 68%. Dallas was also under 50%, punching in breaks after turnovers. New York up at 58% this year. So, like, I don't know. You look at the numbers. I don't think Dallas really has the ability, like Adam said, to like limit those turnovers and play, you know, efficiency ball with New York, considering this is the most efficient team in AUDL history. So, yeah, give me New York by at least 5 goals in this game.
I do think there's just a little bit of recency bias here. So I would agree that I think New York it deserves to be considered the best team ever, but I don't think they smashed the 2016 Roughnecks. I mean, you mentioned all the superstars they had, Adam. They also had Chris Mazer and Matt Jackson and Dalton Smith. And, I mean, their depth was, I think, the reason why they beat Seattle as handily as they did in that 2016 championship game. So I don't think their depth would be, you know, overwhelmed by New York's depth. And I think their stars at that time absolutely could have leveled up. Anyway, if we're talking about New York with such grandiose praise, let's move to topic number 4. And as we begin to look ahead to next year, obviously, out of respect, New York's got to be considered the favorite right now. But are they a minus favorite? Meaning, are they more likely to win than every other team combined? So, Daniel, who you got winning the 2023 AUDL title? The Empire or the other 24 teams?
It's tough. I mean, it'd be 3 championships in 4 seasons for New York if they are able to win next year. I think they faced good enough competition this year, and there were enough other really good teams, especially with how DC pushed them to the very end in that East Division Championship game. DC they showed everyone a recipe for beating New York and showing that New York is mortal. So while as good as New York was this season and as dominant as they were at championship weekend, I still just think it's hard to stay at that elite level for multiple years in a row. So I don't think I'd quite go to minus favorites, although that was a mark they hit like about halfway through this season. So they retain the same pieces and they start off undefeated again, I wouldn't be surprised if that ends up being the line around the halfway mark. No, I'm sticking with my guns, but I'm explaining there's a path to them being minus favorites.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Sure. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Do you agree?
Adam,
yeah, I think they're the overwhelming favorites heading in. I think that they're kind of the overwhelming favorites heading into next year. I mean, look, we just all got done pretty much agreeing that they're the greatest team of all time. They have no real reasons to change. And I think that you heard a pretty vocal chorus from New York's core talent about wanting to run this back, wanting to do it again, realizing that they've now pushed into a rarefied air where they're the only ones competing with themselves and they kind of want to see how far they can push it. I mean, you hear Jack Williams talking about this isn't getting old for them. This is what they want to keep doing. And to kind of hear that from their leadership, I have nothing but an option to trust them at this point. I mean, I think, Evan, you kind of started off this week's Tuesday Toss by saying it. They are who we thought they were. And I think that they're going to kind of continue to be that way until someone takes their crowns from them. And right now, I don't know who that's going to be. I think DC is tremendously talented. Obviously, Carolina and Chicago had their shots at them. But right now, it's New York's empire.
That's well said, and that will wrap up our final toss-up of the season. Any final thoughts that either of you would like to share about the season overall or championship weekend before I say so long?
Ooh, it was a fun one. I liked the drama at the end with New York playing so close against DC, only for us to sort of doubt them going into championship weekend, and then them just disregarding any doubts. I like the roller coaster at the very end of the season.
Adam, your local Madison fans represented themselves well at championship weekend, I thought.
Yep, that's exactly what I was going to say. We kind of earned our title for Capital City of Ultimate. I know we kind of pushed that on everyone at some times, but it felt really nice to have those final 2 nights of the season underneath the lights on the Isthmus. I mean, can't really ask for much of a better stage for the final set of games. So here's to this year's championship weekend and also to the 2023 one, TBD.
Yeah, look forward to that announcement. We got an all-star game coming up in November. Certainly some interesting off-season developments. Who knows? Maybe a new expansion team or two to discuss. And I think we're going to overinflate the expansion teams after what we saw from Salt Lake and Colorado this year. A lot of good stuff ahead. Adam, Daniel, has been really wonderful having both of you on AUDL Weekly all season long. 2 years in a row. I think that's 50 episodes that we've done. So thank you to you both. Thank you to your incredible hair, and I look forward to talking to you as the off-season progresses. We'll take a quick timeout. I'll be back with some final thoughts on the season as we wrap up the season of AUDL Weekly right after this.
To help you not only feel and look incredible, but not
And that will do it for our second season of AUDL Weekly. We hope you've enjoyed this show and found it as an entertaining and informative midweek experience to catch up on everything from the ultimate weekend. And I deliberately use the word we because I certainly don't do this all by myself. As I said before, I'm super grateful to have the insights and expertise of Adam Ruffner and Daniel Cohen every single week. Plus, Matt Smith has just done a phenomenal job at building up, line, and out of bounds into my favorite part of the show. And Luke Johnson spends hours editing B-roll and adding fun little bells and whistles every week. I know it's a grind for him, and quite simply, the show would not be what it is without his extensive, thorough, and talented efforts in putting all the pieces together. So my sincere thanks to all of them, and of course, thanks to you for giving our show a chance and sticking with it throughout the season. If you missed any episodes and want to catch up on the show or relive the season, every episode, along with additional never-before-seen bonus content, is is available right now on AUDL.tv. I'd certainly expect that we'll be back at some point in 2023, if not sooner than that. But until whenever that is, I'm Evan Lepler. Thanks for watching, and thanks for supporting the American Ultimate Disc League as we continue into our second decade. Good night, everybody.